Welcome, Bill Bruford, to We Will Rock You.
Thank you, Sterling.
Thank you very much for being here today. I wanted to congratulate you on a really great piece of work with your autobiography. I've read it twice through already. I really enjoyed it. One of the things I feel really sets your autobiography apart from most entertainment or music bios is the fact that you wrote it yourself with no ghostwriter. Did you have any background in writing prose prior to that?
No, not at all. And of course, I mean, it's incredibly naive of me, really, but, you know, I mean, I just kind of assumed that if you put the word autobiography at the top, it meant you'd written it. It meant that you wrote it yourself. And of course, you know, later on, somebody said how amazing you wrote this yourself, and it never seemed to me to be an issue. I thought everybody did.
How funny.
Shows what I know about the genre, which is namely nothing at all.
What was your process for writing this? Did you sit down and make an outline? Did you go back to journals? How did it begin?
Yeah, a little bit of the latter. I write a lot. I write on the back of, you know, those vomit bags in airplanes when I'm bored. I keep a diary sometimes if I have a laptop with me. I think about things a bit, quite a bit, I guess, in my head. And after a while, you know, a diary and comments kind of grow when you think, well, that's something I wouldn't mind kind of publishing. And before you know it, you've got half a book. I'd also been teaching a course in critical studies, what they call a cultural studies course, at university level. And I thought, there's some good material here about rock and popular music and my place in it. And I feel that I was kind of able to be reasonably dispassionate about the world that I've worked in, even though I have worked in it.
Right. Did you do a lot of rewriting? Is this more or less a first draft, or did you go back? Did you do a first draft and go back and paint? Rewrite?
Sure. You know, and trying to find a form for it is difficult. It's not strictly speaking chronological. So, you know, I wrote a bit and I ran around and wrote a bit more and in and out of my room, kind of writing and bitting it together a little bit. And then I had a very good editor at Jawbone, which is this publisher. And he was great, but a real taskmaster. Chapter 1 came back with red ink all through it. And I thought, this is ridiculous. You can't make me do this, you know. But they do. It was a very rigorous process.
Well, that's how you get the best product in the end, of course, yeah.
It was. We spent, you know, a typical chapter would take 2 or 3 hours down the phone just arguing, you know, content, semantics, form. You know, we spent a lot of time on it.
Very good. As you mentioned, rather than a direct chronology of your career, you chose to jump backward and forward in time within each chapter in a somewhat of a stream of consciousness approach. How did you arrive at that, which is a pretty unorthodox approach?
Well, I don't know really. A straight narrative didn't seem right to me. I mean, it's a book about me certainly, but it's much more important. It's about the music industry.
Right.
So the anecdotal side of my personal experience is used only to illustrate really a bigger point. That's what I was getting at. I was making points about the music industry as I went along and using incidents from my own career, really, to illustrate those things I felt quite strongly about. It might be about equipment, or it might be about record companies or business or songwriting or something. But I would tend to start a chapter with an anecdote and made sure that a bigger point grew out of that. So the thing moves a little bit in waves, a bit like that.
Right. Now, each chapter is titled after a frequently asked question, which is actually a very interesting, fresh approach. How did you decide to do that?
Well, you know, people like me are asked an awful lot of questions. I mean, I really don't know why. I have no idea why people don't ask their electrician all these questions. You know, musicians do a job of work, same as plumbers do. But for some reason, we have to sell our work in newspapers and so forth. And you know, there's a lot of stuff in the book about newspapers and interviews and so forth.
Right.
And a lot of time, you do get asked these extremely facile questions like, so how did you get started?
Right, right.
I always hate that one because it means that what the questioner wants is for you to recount a 41-year career to him.
Right.
So how did you get started? It always sends a chill down my spine. How do you get that fantastic sound is always a... Now, I'm not belittling the questioner here. These questions actually force the interviewee, me, to think, actually, quite a bit. Do you just play anything you like? Well, yes and no, and in interviews, you tend to just give an equally facile kind of answer, but in a book, you can expand, you can really work on that. Do you just play anything you like? Is it different being in jazz? What do you do in the daytime? I mean, Sterling, you there?
Yes, it's an extremely loaded question. What do you do in the daytime?
What do you do in the daytime is a priceless question because it's what the average guy in the street needs to know,
Right.
Because they think musicians just kind of appear, on the other side of the world and start playing. They have no idea that you have to get there.
The average person seems to have their opinion comes from the song "Money for Nothing," right?
It does. I think there's a lot of that, and I find this endearing and charming about the customer. There was once a kind of blonde bombshell stewardess on an airplane, and she, like they all do, said, "Oh, so you fellas, you guys are in a band, right? Okay, great." And she obviously was struggling for the follow-up question, and the follow-up question eventually came out rather hesitatingly: "Is do you guys play mostly long pause, mostly fast music, or kind of slow music?" and it's very hard to explain that music can often be running very fast and very slow at the same time.
Right.
And so when that came as the response, we play both at the same time. She was flummoxed.
This is a person who clearly doesn't know a whole lot about the construction.
Well, that's true, but I don't mean to demean these questions. I think they're quite fun, and they have a kind of deeper Zen side to them, which I really like.
What's the silliest question you've ever been asked by a professional interviewer?
A professional interviewer?
Yeah.
So how did you get started?
Yeah.
is perhaps the most frightening.
Yeah.
Perhaps why did you leave Yes is probably the most common.
Oh, right.
Not why did you form Yes, but why did you leave Yes, which of course is always interesting.
Yeah, you mentioned in the book that probably the most famous you've ever been as far as a lot of focus being on your individual name was for leaving rather than forming.
Yeah, that's, I think, a truism, yes.
That's good. Why are people so fascinated with that?
Good question. It's again a complete misunderstanding of what it is that musicians do, and the implication is that I turn my back on a fortune.
Right.
Anybody and fame, neither of which I'm particularly, I don't run my life around fame and fortune. And anybody who knows anything at all about the music industry would understand that if you play on a record, you get remunerated by royalties for that record, and whether you leave a group or not is immaterial.
Right.
So it's another one of these kind of very baby-type questions, which, again, most people will ask, and only goes to point to me the fact that I'm sure you know, that people seem to know absolutely nothing about what it is a musician does.